A CEO pretends to be her own assistant during meetings, with a romantic interest to gauge whether he values power or personality. The lights of Central Vista gleamed against the night as Brielle Carter leaned back in her penthouse office chair. At just 34, she was the CEO of Arcadia Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. But tonight, the woman behind the power suit wasn't strategizing a merger, she was plotting a social experiment. Her executive assistant had shown her an intriguing portfolio belonging to a man named Theo Landon, an architect bidding to design Arcadia's next headquarters. His work was innovative, his charm effortless, and his smile dangerous. But Brielle had seen too many men falter at the feet of power, intimidated or enchanted by her wealth. So she crafted a plan. For their meeting tomorrow, she wouldn't be Brielle Carter the mogul, she'd be Elle, her own assistant. The real assistant, Margot, would temporarily pose as the CEO. Brielle needed to know, could Theo fall for her, without knowing who she truly was? As she closed her laptop and looked into the mirror, her reflection smirked back. "Let's see how Teep Charm really goes," she whispered. The next morning, Arcadia's boardroom pulsed with quiet anticipation. Margot, impeccably dressed in a tailored blazer, sat confidently at the head of the table. She'd never imagined she'd play the role of CEO, even if temporarily. Meanwhile, Brielle, now Elle, stood beside her with a notepad and a demure smile, her curls pulled into a neat bun and her designer shoes swapped for flats. When Theo Landon entered, he carried an easy grace with him. In his mid-30s, tall and composed, he offered a firm handshake and warm eyes that sparkled with intelligence. He began his presentation, moving through slides with precision and passion. As he explained his vision, a modern, sustainable campus blending nature and innovation, his eyes occasionally flicked toward Brielle. She scribbled notes and nodded, hiding the thrill that surged through her each time he glanced her way. Margot posed as a competent but aloof executive, keeping her questions brief and formal. Theo never once over-flattered her, nor did he display signs of pandering. But it was Elle he lingered near after the meeting, thanking her for her attentiveness. "Your boss is impressive," Theo said, smiling at her. "But there's something about you. You listen like you care." Brielle's heart skipped. The test had begun. 2 days later, Theo requested a follow-up meeting, not with the CEO, but with Elle. He claimed he wanted to better understand Arcadia's culture, to design a space that truly fit the team's soul. Brielle agreed, intrigued by his sincerity. Or was it strategy? They met at a modest coffee shop near the office. Dressed in a simple sweater and jeans, Brielle felt lighter, freer than she had in years. Theo arrived carrying 2 books, one on architecture, one on mindfulness. Their conversation flowed like water. Books, travel, creative inspirations. He asked her what she wanted to do if she weren't an assistant. "I'd probably run something of my own," she said vaguely. "Something that changes lives." "I believe that," he replied, eyes never leaving hers. "You've got more presence than you let on," Brielle smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and warmed her core. Yet guilt fluttered beneath the surface. He thought she was someone else. He was falling for a mask, and she was falling for someone who might not survive the truth. Back at the office, Margot confronted Brielle gently. "You sure you want to keep this going?" Brielle sighed, pacing her office in a state of emotional tug-of-war. "I've never met someone who looks at me like I'm not a dollar sign. He talks to me, not the CEO version of me. That's rare. But the longer you wait," Margot warned, "the deeper the betrayal will feel when he finds out." Brielle nodded, knowing Margot was right. Still, her resolve stayed firm. She needed more time, just a little more, to understand his heart, to understand hers. Meanwhile, Theo began sending texts, not flirty, but thoughtful. Recommendations on documentaries, pictures of beautiful buildings, and articles he thought she'd enjoy. Brielle responded in kind, her replies playful and often laced with inside jokes from their coffee chats. But one night, alone in her high-rise apartment, she scrolled through their messages with a lump in her throat. What if he only liked Elle, the accessible, charming assistant, and would reject the confident, driven CEO? She was learning power didn't protect you from insecurity. It often amplified it. Arcadia's annual gala was the perfect blend of elegance and extravagance. Brielle wore a midnight blue gown and sparkling heels. The guest list included investors, industry leaders, and Theo. As one of Arcadia's potential design partners, he was invited through the corporate liaison. Margot, now back in her regular role, prepped Brielle in the limo. "He won't recognize you instantly. You've never shown him this version." "I'm not sure I recognize this version," Brielle replied. When Theo arrived, his eyes searched the room. He looked dashing in a tailored gray suit, clean-shaven, with a slightly tousled look that somehow made him more attractive. When his gaze landed on Brielle, it lingered. He approached cautiously. "Have we met?" he asked, scanning her face. Brielle smiled cryptically. "I'm someone you've talked to quite a bit." Realization began to dawn on him, but before she could reveal anything, a crowd of executives surrounded them, sweeping her away. The moment had passed, but the spark had ignited. The following week, Theo sent no messages, no articles, no check-ins. Brielle felt the silence like an ache. Had he pieced it all together? Had she gone too far? Finally, she messaged him herself. Just 5 words. "Coffee again, your favorite place," he replied within minutes. "Sure, same time tomorrow." When she arrived, Theo was already there, stirring his tea and watching the steam rise like he was gathering his thoughts. His demeanor was calmer, more measured. "You're not just an assistant," he said softly, eyes sharp but not angry. "Are you?" Brielle sat down slowly. "No, I'm not." Silence. Then he asked, "Why pretend?" She sighed, hands folded on the table. "Because I needed to know if you were interested in me. Not the title, not the company, just the woman." He took a breath. "And now that I know who you are, does that woman still want to know me?" Brielle looked into his eyes, voice steady but vulnerable. "Yes, but only if you still want to know her." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe this isn't over." The truth was out. No more assistant charade. No more daily performance. And yet Brielle had never felt more exposed. Vulnerability was a strange outfit for someone used to tailored suits and boardroom dominance. Theo, for his part, handled it with quiet grace. He didn't lash out or disappear. Instead, he invited her to walk through the city that evening. No agenda, no expectations. Just 2 people peeling back the layers. They wandered along the Riverside Parkway, the glow of lanterns casting a soft light over their path. Brielle confessed her fear of being loved for her image instead of her identity. Theo admitted he'd grown tired of transactional relationships and had almost lost faith in genuine connection. "What drew me to you wasn't the lie," he said gently, "but the fact that even behind the mask you were real. You listened, you laughed, you cared." Brielle's chest tightened. For once she wasn't negotiating a deal or analyzing a pitch. She was just being seen. They stopped beneath an old stone arch where music from a nearby street performer floated toward them. Theo extended his hand. "Dance with me, Elle, or Brielle, whatever your name is." She laughed, and she danced. Over the next week, Brielle and Theo began again, this time with no disguises. They met at parks, art exhibits, and cozy wine bars, talking about family, childhood memories, and the things that broke them before they ever met each other. Brielle shared her journey from a scholarship student to CEO, the sleepless nights, the loneliness masked by accomplishment. Theo opened up about his failed engagement years ago, and how he'd buried himself in blueprints to avoid emotional risk. There were still moments of tension, moments when Brielle overanalyzed his reactions or questioned his intentions. She was used to controlling outcomes, and love didn't fit neatly into a spreadsheet. But Theo surprised her. He didn't shrink from her success, he celebrated it. "You're intimidating," he once told her with a grin. "But in the best way. You make me want to level up, not to compete but to meet you where you are." It wasn't smooth sailing, but it was real, and that made all the difference. Word of Brielle's connection with Theo reached Arcadia's inner circle faster than expected. Though they hadn't made anything official, the board was buzzing. Some members were curious, others skeptical. "You're dating a potential contractor?" one executive asked during a strategy meeting. "Isn't that a conflict?" Brielle held her composure. Theo's firm was never granted the contract. He was a finalist. "We're pursuing a different direction," that was true. After the gala, Brielle had redirected the project to a new team, ensuring no favoritism or overlap. But it still didn't stop the whispers. Later, Margot approached her. "You okay?" Brielle nodded. "It's the first time my personal life has ever been judged louder than my professional choices." Margot gave her a knowing look. "That means it matters." Brielle wasn't used to needing anyone. But with Theo, need wasn't weakness, it was human, and that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. One evening, Theo asked Brielle to meet him at a building under renovation on the edge of the city. It was raw, industrial, and still wrapped in scaffolding, but it held character. When she arrived, he guided her inside with a flashlight. "This is my dream project," he said, leading her through bare concrete halls. "I bought it last year but haven't touched it yet. I've been waiting for the right inspiration." Brielle raised a brow. "Are you trying to sell me a building?" "No," he chuckled. "I'm trying to share a vision. I want to build this into a community space, art, tech, entrepreneurship, all under one roof, a creative haven. But I want you involved, not as the CEO of Arcadia, as you." She stared at him, surprised. "You want to work with me?" "Not just work. I want to build something that lasts, with someone who knows how to do that." It wasn't a romantic proposal, but it felt just as weighty. Theo wasn't just seeing her now, he was inviting her into something deeper, shared purpose, shared trust. She walked beside him, touched the rough wall and smiled. Let's build. Their budding relationship was thrust into the spotlight sooner than either had anticipated. A photo of them at the city's museum gala surfaced online. Brielle in a silver gown, Theo at her side in a sharp suit, their hands just barely touching. The caption read, "Arcadia's Queen and Her Mystery Architect." By the next morning, news blogs speculated about their romance. Social media buzzed. Investors reached out with questions cloaked as concerns. Brielle held a press briefing to refocus attention on Arcadia's upcoming tech rollout. But a reporter couldn't help asking, "Is it true you're dating someone who once pitched to your company?" She smiled calmly. "Yes, we met through professional channels, but our personal connection is independent of any company decisions. Integrity always comes first." It was a strong statement, but also a tightrope. Afterward, Theo sent her a text. "Still proud of you, still not scared." Brielle realized then his support wasn't conditional. It was rooted in respect, and for a woman who had built her empire alone, that kind of partnership felt like the most unexpected gift of all. Despite handling the press gracefully, Brielle's most challenging confrontation was still ahead, her parents. Though supportive of her success, they were deeply traditional and skeptical of any man who wasn't on her level. Theo was an unknown to them, especially after they learned about his initial role as a bidder for her company. "He wasn't just trying to get close to you for a contract?" her mother asked cautiously over Sunday dinner. "No," Brielle said firmly. "He walked away from the opportunity when things got personal." "That speaks volumes." Her father remained silent for a long time, sipping his tea thoughtfully. Finally he said, "It's not about status, it's about stability. Does he have what it takes to stand beside someone like you?" Brielle's gaze didn't waver. "Yes, because he sees me beyond the title. That's more than most ever have." A week later, Theo joined them for dinner. He came dressed in a crisp blazer, brought her mother flowers, and listened more than he talked. He spoke of his vision, his values, and what he admired in Brielle, not as a CEO, but as a woman. By dessert, her parents weren't completely sold, but they weren't opposed either. Progress. One crisp autumn evening, Brielle and Theo stood on the roof of his unfinished building project, sipping hot cider as the sun dipped below the skyline. "I don't know how this happened," Brielle murmured. "One minute I'm testing you. The next, I'm trusting you." Theo turned to her. "The real test wasn't whether I'd like you without power. It was whether you'd let someone in once they saw all of you." Brielle blinked, stunned by the truth of his words. For years she had kept her guard up, hiding behind titles, strategies, and expectations. But with Theo, that armor had cracked, not because he tore it down, but because he never asked her to wear it. He touched her cheek gently. "You're allowed to be brilliant and vulnerable at the same time. One doesn't cancel out the other." She leaned into him, their foreheads touching. No lies, no roles, just raw honesty. And in that moment she realized she wasn't falling into a trap, she was falling into something real. Over the following months, the warehouse project evolved from concept to reality. Brielle and Theo worked as partners, her background in business, his in architecture, building something neither could have done alone. They decided to name it the Foundry. It was more than a space. It was a symbol of what's forged through collaboration, transparency, and courage. The process wasn't without its challenges. There were budget disagreements, design compromises, and logistical headaches. But unlike previous partnerships in her life, Brielle found comfort in the conflict. They weren't afraid to argue because they respected each other enough to listen. And every night, after meetings and construction dust settled, they returned to each other not as professionals, but as companions. They cooked together, took long walks, and even started journaling, sharing entries on their fears, dreams, and growth. One night, Theo handed her a journal page that read, "You didn't just change how I see love, you changed how I see myself." Brielle held his hand tightly, realizing that their foundation wasn't just concrete and steel, it was trust. Brielle was invited to speak at an international Women in Leadership conference in Tokyo. It was a prestigious honor. Hundreds of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and visionaries gathered under one roof. Theo encouraged her to go. "Tell your story," he said. "All of it, even the part with me." Nervous but empowered, Brielle took the stage and opened with a confession that stunned the crowd. "I once pretended to be my own assistant, just to see if a man could love me without knowing who I was." Gasps, laughter, intrigue. She went on to describe the emotional complexity of being a woman in power, and the loneliness that often accompanies it. "But what I found wasn't just love," she concluded. "I found that the truest connection comes when you stop leading with your resume and start leading with your humanity." The speech went viral within hours. Back home, Theo met her at the airport with flowers and open arms. "You told the world the truth," he whispered. "Now the world finally knows what I've always seen in you." Soon after her viral speech, Brielle was approached by a major global tech conglomerate. They offered her a position as their next president, an empire 5 times larger than Arcadia. It was everything she had once dreamed of: prestige, power, a seat among the most influential people on the planet. But the offer came with conditions. She'd have to relocate to Zurich, she'd have to relinquish her role in the foundry, and most of all, she'd have to leave Theo behind. She sat on her balcony that night, weighing ambition against affection, legacy against love. In the end, she declined. "I've spent years chasing power," she told the board. "Now I want to build something that chases meaning." It shocked many, inspired more. When she told Theo, he didn't say a word. He simply pulled her into a hug that said everything. Sometimes walking away from the biggest opportunity is the bravest thing you can do. Now that their relationship was fully in the open, Brielle and Theo faced a new phase. One without pretense, secrets, or carefully calculated moves. For the first time in her life, Brielle was loved not in spite of her ambition, but alongside it. Yet even in this newfound stability, she occasionally struggled. Public perception still painted her as the alpha woman, the towering CEO who chose a man outside her elite circle. Online articles whispered about power imbalance and settling. Theo, however, never flinched. "I didn't fall in love with a CEO," he told her one quiet evening. "I fell in love with the woman who drinks her coffee too fast and still cries at animated movies." And that meant more to her than any title ever had. They began hosting monthly workshops together at the foundry, blending leadership training with creative therapy, helping young professionals balance purpose with pressure. People responded. The space thrived. Brielle realized then, she hadn't given anything up. She had just redefined what winning looked like. And this felt like the ultimate victory. Months turned into a year, and the foundry blossomed into a hub for change makers, dreamers, and disruptors. Brielle and Theo were no longer seen as an unconventional pairing, but as visionaries who built something extraordinary from authenticity. When a popular business magazine asked to profile Brielle, she insisted Theo be included. The headline read, "The CEO who led by listening and loved by letting go." The article chronicled her journey, the fake assistant setup, the emotional risks, and the beautiful chaos that followed. It struck a chord. Readers flooded the publication with letters of admiration, many from women who felt seen for the first time. Brielle was invited onto panels, podcasts, even late-night television, but this time she didn't need to wear a mask. Instead of the power woman narrative she'd carried for so long, she embraced a more human one. The builder, the lover, the risk-taker. She'd rewritten her story, and others now felt brave enough to write theirs. One breezy spring morning, Theo led Brielle back to the rooftop of the foundry, the place where they'd first dreamed together. It was newly finished. The skyline sparkled. Fairy lights danced above a small table set for two. "I have one last blueprint to show you," he said with a smile. He handed her a scroll. It wasn't a building layout. It was a sketch of their journey: coffee dates, construction dust, conference speeches, dancing beneath city lights. And at the bottom, a small drawing of an engagement ring. Brielle looked up, stunned. Theo knelt. "Not because of who you are to the world, but because of who you are to me. Will you keep building this life with me?" Tears welled in her eyes, not from surprise, but from the overwhelming rightness of the moment. "Yes," she whispered, "to love, to truth, to all of it." They married in a quiet ceremony inside the foundry's atrium, beneath a ceiling of glass and steel, equal parts strength and transparency. The guest list was modest. The vows were real. Brielle wore no crown, no CEO badge, no armor. Just a satin dress, bare feet, and joy radiating from her smile. Theo looked at her like she was the sun itself, too bright to touch, yet completely his. Afterward, they danced to a live quartet, the same melody that once played under a stone arch on a city street. No longer strangers, no longer roles, they were simply Brielle and Theo. Two people who had once tested love with a lie, and found the truth worth far more. As their guests raised glasses and laughter echoed through the foundry, Brielle whispered in Theo's ear, "Funny how pretending to be someone else led me to finally being myself." And as they held each other close, surrounded by the life they had built, one truth became undeniable. The best love stories begin when you stop pretending. If you enjoyed this story about identity, love, and courage, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives that go beyond the surface and straight to the heart.